that essentially the heart ultrasound is a cross-sectional images that depends on the angle of the probe that tell us, give us different echocardiogram. Essentially, briefly speaking, she does have complex congenital defects that is called tetralogy of Fallot. It comprises like multiple structural defects, and so the first images I wanted to show you is essentially this one. This is the first views that we usually obtain from the echo. So you can imagine like we're looking at the heart like this view.
Okay.
The left lower chamber, the left upper chamber, left atrium, left lower chamber, left ventricle, right upper chamber, and right lower chamber. The first abnormal findings when we kind of stick the probes on and have the images, it appears that the right upper chamber is pretty enlarged. Normally it shouldn't be larger than the left upper chambers. They should be the right upper chamber should be slightly smaller, or even like not, so it shouldn't be bigger than the left upper chamber. So the right upper chamber is pretty large, and also subjectively the right lower chamber, the right ventricle, it also appears enlarged. In addition, the muscle thickness of the right lower chamber is also more thicker, essentially. On this view, so the left lower chamber is the muscle chamber that is kind of plays a role in kind of squeezing, pumping the blood flow to the aorta, the great artery. So it should have the thickest muscle wall, and the right lower chamber shouldn't have like muscle wall thickness that is kind of same degree as the left lower chamber. So it appears that there's some concentric hypertrophy. Essentially means that the muscle wall is thicker of the right lower chamber. That is kind of the first impressions when we start the echoing her. Then we start to looking at if there's any kind of congenital defects. The color, this is called a color Doppler, which we put on a different like mode so that the color tells us the direction of the blood flow, essentially. So there's a spectrum of color. Different color means that the blood flow goes to different color, and you can see there's a mixture of colors in this area, which means that there is a turbulent blood flow across this level, and that is essentially the source of her heart murmurs. And when we removed the color Doppler, there is the defect here. I might kind of pause so that I can show the still images. There's the defect here. Different views. And that's where the turbulent blood flow go through. So on this view, the aorta, the muscle wall here separating the lower chamber is called interventricular septum, and there's a defect here connecting the right lower chamber and the aorta. That is called ventricular septal defect, abbreviated as VSD. And this is a component, one of the like abnormality, one of the defect that kind of comprise the whole tetralogy of Fallot. So VSD is one of the abnormality here, and the blood flow direction is going from the right lower chamber in this direction to the aorta here. So essentially the blood flow is going from here to here. That carried, so the reason why she's turned blue is that the blood in the right-sided heart, which receive blood flow from the body circulation, is deoxygenated because the body is consuming oxygens, so that the returns of the blood flow from the body system is poured in oxygen. And therefore, there's defect which carry a deoxygenated blood to the aorta, which normally should carry oxygenated blood flow from the left-sided heart to the body system to support, to kind of supply oxygen to the body system. Now there's a mixture of oxygenated.
It's kind of skipping.
Yep.
Use some wood filler in that thing. Use some like wood filler.
Wood filler?
Yeah, and just fill up the gap. Yeah, that would. Yeah, no.
No.
No electrical tape. No. Okay. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's no kind of surgical options to repair the defect, so that the mixture of oxygenated and deoxygenated blood flow to the body system on clinical presentation, that's why we see she is bluish instead of pinkish. Okay. Normally, the blood flow shouldn't be this direction because like the left-sided heart and the aorta, the pressure here is always kind of higher than the right-sided. The reason why the blood flow is going in this direction is that the right-sided heart chambers, the pressure in here is higher in the left-sided, which is abnormal, which means that there has been a disease process causing pressure to build up in the right-sided heart. And that is also kind of a clinical sequela in this kind of complex congenital defect. Now I'm just explaining one of the defects in her disease process, the VSD. Essentially, the tetralogy means that there are essentially 4 defects.
Okay.
3 of the defect is the route, the pathway of the great vessel kind of overriding to the right side. So it's normally a course like here, but in her case, the aorta course in here, kind of overriding over the right-sided heart. And then there's a defect, and the blood flow goes in this direction.
Okay.
Yeah. So overriding aorta is the second primary defect.
Okay.
The third primary defect, it's called pulmonic stenosis. Because you imagine that the pulmonary artery, the lung artery is here, which kind of in a pretty close proximity of the aorta. If there is the overriding aorta here, which kind of there can be a concurrent like abnormal development of the pulmonic artery, the lung artery, so that the diameter of the pulmonic artery is narrow. There can also be a concurrent valvular abnormality, which further exacerbate the narrowing. So the pulmonic stenosis means that there's a degree of narrowing in this level, like the pulmonary vein, the pulmonary artery, which is the artery that supplies blood flow to the lung circulation. So this is the third defect also found in her case that there is a degree of narrowing of her pulmonary artery. The clinical sequel out of it is that given that there's a narrowing artery here, the right-sided heart has to work harder to squeeze the blood through this level of narrowing to the lung circulation.
Mm-hmm.
So that is why the right-sided muscle, ventricular muscle is getting thicker and thicker. So right-sided right ventricular concentric hypertrophy, the thickening of the muscle wall, is the fourth abnormality found in tetralogy of Villot, but it is a secondary changes, secondary to the pulmonic stenosis. Okay, these are the fourth abnormality that were all